You know what connects a modern teenager watching The Vampire Diaries and an ancient Sumerian telling stories around a campfire? They both fear the same thing, creatures that were once human but crossed the line between life and death. Vampires are the only monsters that don't just scare us. They make us think about human nature. They are beautiful and repulsive at the same time. They promise eternity and bring death. Today, we'll break down why humanity hasn't been able to shake its obsession with blood-sucking undead for millennia. We'll learn what real events spawned these legends and find out why the terrifying monsters of the past have turned into the romantic heroes of today. Get ready to learn the truth about the most alluring creatures of darkness. The most ancient human texts already mention creatures that feed on human blood. Mesopotamian tablets tell of Utuku spirits that drank the blood of sleeping people. The ancient Egyptians knew about the demoness Sekhmet, a lioness goddess who could turn into a bloodthirsty killer, but the true matriarch of all vampires appeared in the Jewish tradition. Lilith. That's the name everyone interested in vampire history should remember. Legend says she was Adam's first wife, created from the same clay. When Lilith refused to submit to her husband, God banished her from Eden. And this is where it gets interesting. The rejected first woman turned into a demoness who drank the blood of infants and seduced men. Isn't that the perfect vampire portrait? But the ancient Greeks took the concept even further. Their lemii were serpent women who seduced travelers and sucked their blood. These creatures could shapeshift, becoming irresistibly beautiful. Sound familiar? Almost all modern ideas about seductive vampires originate right here. The Slavic tradition, however, gave us Upyri, returning dead who terrorized entire villages. Interestingly, Slavic vampires were far from the refined creatures of later tales. They looked like decomposing corpses, reeked of decay, and acted more like zombies. But they gave us the primary methods for fighting the undead. The Romanians created perhaps the most developed vampire mythology. Strigoi were the souls of people who could not find peace after death, and Moroi were living people who could turn into vampires at night. Imagine this. Your neighbor is an ordinary person by day but hunts for human blood by night. Could anything be more terrifying? What made our ancestors create such similar legends in different parts of the world? Scholars believe real events were the basis. Plague epidemics, where people didn't understand the cause of mass mortality, when entire families died within days and bodies decomposed in unusual ways. Stories were born of the dead rising from their graves. Fear of misunderstood illnesses also played a role. Catalepsy led to people being buried alive, only to be found later in their coffins in unnatural positions. Porphyria caused sufferers to avoid sunlight and could create a thirst for blood. Rabies made people aggressive and prone to biting. All these diseases spawned entire layers of vampire mythology. But the most fascinating part is why blood became the central element of these legends. In all ancient cultures, blood was considered the carrier of life force. The soul of the body is in the blood, said the ancient Hebrews. It's logical that creatures striving for immortality would need to feed on the very essence of life. Thus, the concept of vampirism as a twisted path to eternity was born. It's astonishing, but practically every culture on Earth created its own version of blood-sucking undead. In Eastern Europe, these were vampires as we commonly know them. Polish Upyri could take the form of animals. Czech Nachozi returned to torment their murderers. Serbian vampires felt so real to locals that in the 18th century, Austrian authorities even sent military officials to investigate so-called vampire epidemics. Hungarian vampires were known for their particular cruelty and ability to enter homes through the smallest cracks. They could turn into mist or bats, ideas later picked up by Bram Stoker for his Dracula. Bulgarian vampires could create illusions and drive people mad with a single glance. In Asia, vampires took on entirely different characteristics. Chinese jiangshi are hopping corpses with greenish skin and long nails. They moved in comical hops because their bodies stiffened after death. Yet they possessed inhuman strength and could suck the life energy, qi, right out of their victims. Japanese Kyukitsuki were spirits that could possess living people and force them to drink blood. Korean Kansen were cannibalistic spirits that kept their human appearance and could live among people for years, periodically preying on their neighbors. Imagine the horror of villagers discovering their kind acquaintance was actually a monster. Southeast Asia gave us the aswang, Filipino vampire shapeshifters with a particular taste for the blood of pregnant women and infants. They could take the form of dogs, pigs, or birds, and their favorite tactic was entering homes through the roofs. The Malaysian Penanggalan are flying heads with dangling entrails that hunted women in childbirth. African vampires are striking in their diversity. Ghana's ads could turn into fireflies and drink blood through tiny bites. Zulu and Pundulu took the form of giant birds with human hands instead of wings. Ethiopian Buddha were hyena shapeshifters that could turn people into vampires with a single bite. In the Americas before Europeans arrived, there were also bloodsuckers. The Aztecs knew of the Tlahuelpuchi, sorceresses who turned into turkeys and drank the blood of infants. The Incas spoke of the Pishtaco, pale-skinned monsters that killed people and drank their fat. Many researchers believe these legends reflected the fear of European conquerors. But the most famous American vampire appeared much later, the chupacabra, the goat sucker from Puerto Rico. In 1995, reports of a strange creature that sucked the blood of livestock spread worldwide. The chupacabra became the first internet vampire, a legend spread through modern media. So why did humanity create such similar legends in completely different parts of the planet? The answer lies in the universality of human fears. The fear of death, the fear of losing control, the fear of strangers among us, all found reflection in the vampire image. Each culture adapted the basic concept to its specific phobias and social problems. Interestingly, the more isolated a culture was, the more unique its vampires became. Conversely, in places with active trade and cultural exchange, vampire legends quickly mixed and borrowed from each other. This proves the fear of vampires was so strong that people were willing to adopt protection methods from foreigners. Despite geographical diversity, all the world's vampires share surprisingly similar traits. They shun sunlight, possess superhuman strength, can change form, and, of course, feed on human blood or life energy. But their most important feature is that they were once human. This is precisely what makes them so frightening. Think about it. Zombies, werewolves, demons, they are all in a way other. But vampires are us, only corrupted, twisted. A vampire remembers its human life, retains its mind, but has lost all human virtue. They embody the fear of what we might become if we lose our humanity. The underlying themes in vampire legends are impossible to ignore. A vampire's bite is always an intimate act, a penetration of the victim's body, an exchange of fluids. In many cultures, vampires were described as incredibly attractive beings capable of seducing anyone. They embodied forbidden desires and fears about our own sexuality. This is especially noticeable in how female vampires were described. Lilith, Lamii, Strigoi, all were beautiful, seductive, and deadly dangerous. They represented the archetype of the femme fatale, using their attractiveness as a weapon. In patriarchal societies, this was a way to express fear of female sexuality and independence. Vampires also embodied the taboo desire for immortality at any cost. In a world where average life expectancy rarely exceeded 30-40 years, the idea of eternal life was incredibly tempting, even if that life required killing others. The vampire is a person who chose immortality over morality. Blood plays a special role in vampire legends as a symbol of life force. In all ancient cultures, blood was considered a sacred substance, the bearer of the soul. Therefore, drinking blood wasn't just an act of consumption, it was a sacrilegious absorption of another's soul. The vampire committed a spiritual murder, not just a physical one. The ability to turn into animals reflected the fear of losing human form. Bats, wolves, rats, all these animals were associated with night, disease, and death. Transforming into them symbolized the final loss of humanity. And the ability to fly made the vampire almost invulnerable. You couldn't hide from it in a house or a tower. The lack of a reflection or shadow in legends symbolized the loss of the soul. In ancient beliefs, one's reflection and shadow were manifestations of a person's spiritual essence. A vampire, having lost its soul, couldn't be reflected in mirrors and cast no shadow. This was a way to recognize a monster hiding among people. Now, for the most intriguing part, many vampire legends had very real foundations. Modern medicine explains most vampire traits with specific diseases. Catalepsy led to people being buried in a state of lethargic sleep. When they woke in their coffins, their attempts to escape left marks perceived as proof of resurrection. Porphyria, a rare genetic disease, causes sensitivity to sunlight, pale skin, and tooth deformation. Porphyria sufferers literally fear light and can experience a craving for blood since it contains heme, a substance they lack. It's no wonder such people were considered vampires. Rabies turned ordinary people into aggressive beings who bit and avoided water. The hydrophobia characteristic of this disease explained why vampires couldn't cross running water. Their aggression and attempts to bite victims made rabies sufferers resemble classic vampires. Archaeologists regularly find medieval burials with signs of anti-vampire rituals. Corpses with stakes in their chests, stones in their mouths, severed heads. In 2012, a whole vampire graveyard was found in Bulgaria. Over 100 skeletons with metal rods through their heart area. This proves the fear of vampires was so real that people took concrete precautionary measures. There are many such finds in Eastern Europe from the period of vampire epidemics in the 17th, 18th centuries. At that time, entire regions were gripped by mass hysteria. People believed those who died from the plague or other illnesses returned as vampires and infected the living. Authorities were forced to issue special decrees prohibiting the exhumation of corpses to destroy vampires. The most famous case happened in the Serbian village of Medvegia in 1732. After the death of a peasant named Arnold Paule, people in the village began dying under mysterious circumstances. Locals blamed a vampire and exhumed Paule's body. They claimed to find it fresh, with blood on its lips. This case was officially investigated by Austrian military officials and sparked a real European vampire craze. Interestingly, the freshness of exhumed bodies is explained by natural decomposition processes. Under certain conditions, low temperature, clay soil, bodies can be preserved for months. Gases from decomposition can force blood out through the mouth, creating the illusion of recent feeding. But our ancestors saw this as proof of vampirism. Historical figures also contributed to vampire mythology. Vlad III Tepes, known as Dracula, was indeed a ruthless ruler of Wallachia in the 15th century. His favorite method of execution, impalement, and rumors that he drank his enemy's blood made him the perfect prototype for literary vampires. Elizabeth Báthory, the Blood Countess of Hungary, is legendarily accused of causing the deaths of over 600 young girls and bathing in their blood, believing it would preserve her youth. Although many historians doubt the accuracy of these accusations, the image of an aristocratic blood drinker became firmly entrenched in vampire lore. Wherever vampires appeared, methods to fight them inevitably emerged. Every culture developed its own arsenal of anti-vampire measures, and surprisingly, many of these methods turned out to be universal. Garlic was used against vampires in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Why garlic? Its pungent smell was associated with vitality and health, and it also masked the smell of decay. Christian symbols, crosses, holy water, consecrated objects became powerful weapons against the undead in the European tradition. But even before Christianity, people used iron, silver, and salt for protection against evil spirits. Iron was considered the metal of the gods, silver symbolized purity, and salt was a symbol of preservation and protection from decay. Wooden stakes through the heart are perhaps the most famous way to destroy a vampire, but few know the wood had to be from specific types of trees. In Europe, they preferred hawthorn, oak, or ash, trees considered sacred. In Asia, they used peachwood, which symbolized life and warded off evil spirits. Professional vampire hunters existed in many cultures. In Romania, they were dampirs, children of vampires and mortal women who could see and destroy their fathers. In Bulgaria, vampirji were specialists who knew all the intricacies of hunting the undead. In China, Taoist magicians exorcised zhongshi using special spells. Methods of protection from vampires were no less diverse. People scattered poppy seeds or rice around houses. It was believed vampires were compelled to count every grain before dawn. Mirrors were hung in windows, so a vampire would see its lack of reflection and be frightened. Magical symbols from various religions were drawn on thresholds. The rituals for killing vampires are striking in their cruelty and detail. The body had to be exhumed at a specific time, pierced with a stake, beheaded, burned, and the ashes scattered in running water. In some cultures, the mouth also had to be filled with garlic or sacred symbols. These rituals served not only a practical function, but also as a way for the community to achieve psychological closure. But the most interesting thing is that many anti-vampire traditions have survived to this day in an altered form. The custom of decorating homes with garlic on Halloween, wearing silver crosses, the fear of black cats and bats, all these are echoes of ancient ways to protect against vampires. Did you know that the tradition of knocking on wood so as not to jinx it is also linked to anti-vampire magic? It was believed that tree spirits would help protect against evil forces. Similarly, the custom of spitting over your left shoulder when meeting unpleasant people harkens back to the belief that it could ward off a lurking vampire. But how did the terrifying monsters of antiquity turn into the romantic heroes of modernity? This metamorphosis began in the Romantic era when writers discovered the perfect symbol of forbidden passion in the vampire. In 1819, John Polidori wrote the novella The Vampire, which first portrayed the bloodsucker as an aristocratic seducer. No more rotting corpses, just a mysterious pallor and irresistible charm. It was Polidori who created the image of the vampire gentleman, which became the basis for all subsequent interpretations. His Lord Ruthven was educated, wealthy, and an incredibly attractive man who used his status to hunt victims. This image proved so powerful that it still defines our perception of vampires today. But the real revolution was made by Bram Stoker with his Dracula in 1897. Stoker combined all existing vampire traditions and created the universal vampire. Count Dracula could turn into a bat, wolf, or mist. He cast no reflection in mirrors. He feared garlic and crosses. Yet he remained an aristocrat with impeccable manners. What made Dracula special? Stoker was the first to show the vampire as a tragic figure, a creature doomed to eternal suffering. Dracula isn't just a villain, he is a victim of his own curse. This concept of the suffering monster became the basis for all modern interpretations of vampirism. Cinema picked up and developed the literary tradition. F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu, 1922, still retained the horrifying appearance of the classic vampire. But by 1931, Bela Lugosi had created the image of an elegant Count Dracula with a Romanian accent and a hypnotic gaze. This film laid the foundation for vampire cinema for decades to come. Want to know the secret of vampires' popularity in movies? They allow us to explore forbidden themes within a fantasy framework. Sexuality, death, power, immortality, all the things that are uncomfortable to discuss directly. The vampire became the perfect metaphor for discussing human taboos in a safe, fantastical form. The 1950s and 60s brought domestic vampires, creatures that could live among ordinary people. The TV series Dark Shadows presented the vampire Barnabas Collins as a tragic romantic hero struggling with his nature. For the first time in history, audiences began to sympathize with the vampire more than his victims. But the real revolution happened in 1976 with the publication of Anne Rice's novel, Interview with the Vampire. Rice was the first to tell the story from the vampire's perspective, showing his inner world, suffering, and philosophical musings. Her Louis and Lestat were not monsters but complex characters with rich emotional lives. Rice made vampires truly human. They loved, suffered, and searched for meaning in their existence. Immortality in her interpretation became not a blessing but a curse, dooming one to eternal loneliness. This concept of the vampire as a metaphor for the human condition defined the genre's development to this day. The 1990s brought Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which for the first time showed a vampire as a potential ally of the heroes. Angel, a vampire with a soul, fighting against his nature for love of a human girl. This plot became the basis for countless romances between vampires and humans. The early 2000s saw the rise of urban vampires, creatures fully integrated into modern society. The films Blade and Underworld showed entire vampire communities with their own politics, economy, and social structure. Vampires were no longer lonely monsters. They became an alternative species. And then came Stephenie Meyer's Twilight, which finally turned vampires into romantic heroes for teenagers. Edward Cullen doesn't drink human blood, sparkles in the sun, and agonizes over his love for a mortal girl. Many fans of classic vampires were outraged by this interpretation, but one can't deny, Meyer created a new archetype. Modern TV series have taken the romanticization of vampires to the absolute. The Vampire Diaries, True Blood, the originals, all show vampires as sexy, passionate, yet capable of true love. Being a vampire is no longer a curse, but almost a privilege. Beauty, strength, immortality, and a tumultuous personal life. So what happened to our fears? Why are we no longer afraid of vampires but dream of becoming them? Modern society has changed its attitude toward death, blood, and sexuality. What frightened our ancestors seems attractive today. Immortality in an era of short lifespans was a terrible curse, but in an era of longevity, it has become a desired dream. Sociologists note that modern vampires reflect changes in the understanding of masculinity and relationships between the sexes. Today's ideal man is supposed to be strong but sensitive, dangerous but in control, passionate but faithful. The vampire embodies all these contradictory qualities in one image. Female vampire characters have also evolved. From demonic seductresses, they have turned into strong, independent heroines who choose their own destiny. The modern vampire woman is not a victim of the male vampire, but an equal partner or even a leader. She symbolizes female emancipation and the right to her own sexuality. It's interesting how the attitude toward the vampire diet has changed. Drinking human blood used to be an absolute evil. Today, many authors invent alternatives: artificial blood, animal blood, energy drinks with a bloody taste. Vampires are going vegan, reflecting modern concerns about ethical consumption. Technology has also influenced the evolution of vampires. Modern vampires use smartphones, drive cars, and work in corporations. They've adapted to the digital age. Some authors even create vampire programmers who feed on data instead of blood. Ancient monsters have become the new IT specialists. But the most amazing thing is how vampires have become a symbol of outsiders and minorities. In many modern works, vampirism is used as a metaphor to discuss issues of discrimination, self-acceptance, and finding one's place in society. The vampire has transformed from a symbol of evil into a symbol of being misunderstood and rejected. Vampire legends have come an incredible way, from ancient fears of the dead to modern fantasies of eternal love. They have evolved with humanity, reflecting our changing fears, desires, and concepts of morality. What once scared us to death now seems romantic and attractive. Perhaps the secret to the resilience of vampire legends is that they speak to the most profound human needs: the desire to be special, strong, immortal, the fear of being forgotten after death, the search for balance between animal instincts and humanity. Vampires are us, just in an extreme manifestation. And as long as we remain human, these legends will live and transform with us. What mythological creatures intrigue you the most? Write in the comments which legends you'd like to hear about in our next videos. After all, the world of mythology is still full of unsolved mysteries, just waiting for their moment.